Richard Nixon was the 37th President of the United States, serving from 1969 to 1974, and was the only president to resign from office. Nixon had previously served as a Republican U.S. Representative and Senator from California. He had also filled the title of being the 36th President of the United States from 1953 to 1961. Nixon was born in Yorba Linda, California. He graduated from Whittier College in 1934 and Duke University School of Law in 1937. In 1942, he and his wife, Pat Nixon, then moved to Washington to work for the federal government. Nixon was elected in California to the House of Representatives in 1946 and to the Senate in 1950. His pursuit of Alger Hiss case established his reputation as a leading anti-communist and elevated him to national prominence. Nixon served for 8 years as vice president. He waged an unsuccessful presidential campaign in 1960, narrowly losing to John F. Kennedy, and lost the race for governor of California in 1962. But in 1968, he ran again for presidency and was elected. In 1972, Congress approved Title IX, which banned gender discrimination in higher education, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which required that married women be given access to credit in their own name. The giant corporation American Telephone and Telegraph entered into a landmark agreement in which it agreed to pay millions of dollars to workers who had suffered gender discrimination and to upgrade employment opportunities for women. The number of women at work continued its upward climb. By 1960, 20% of women with children had been in the workforce. The figure reached 40% in 1980 and 55% in 1990. Working women were motivated by varied aims. Some saw careers in professions and skilled jobs previously open only to men. Others, spurred by the need to bolster family income as the economy faltered, flooded into the traditional low-wage pink-collar sector, working as cashiers, secretaries, and telephone operators. On June 23, 1972, Richard Nixon signed Title IX of the Education Amendments. Title IX is a portion of the Education Amendments of 1972. It states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Although the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was written in order to end discrimination based on religion, race, color, or national origin, the act also energized the women's rights movement, which had somewhat slowed after women's suffrage in 1920. While Title IX was best known for its impact on high school and college athletics, the original statute made no explicit mention of sports.
On August 8, 1969, President Nixon went on national television to promote his domestic policy plan, the AFDC. The AFDC is a family assistance plan, also known as welfare, which helped families with dependent children by having the federal government guarantee a minimum income for all Americans. It provided assistance to poor families who met local eligibility requirements. It mainly served the white poor. Welfare had come to be associated with blacks by 1970, and they accounted for nearly half the recipients. The AFDC roles expanded rapidly during the 1960s, partly because the federal government relaxed eligibility standards. This arose from an increase in births to unmarried women, which produced a sharp rise in the number of poor female-headed households, and from an aggressive campaign by welfare rights groups to encourage people to apply for benefits. Conservative politicians now attack recipients of welfare as people who prefer to live at the expense of honest taxpayers, rather than by working class. A striking example of Nixon's willingness to break the political mold, his plan to replace welfare with a guaranteed annual income failed to win approval by Congress. It proved too radical for conservatives, who saw it was reward for laziness, while liberals denounced the proposed level of $1,600 per year for a needy family of four as inadequate.
Richard Nixon was elected president January 20th, 1969. During his term, he continued his involvement in the Vietnam War to end the conflict and secure peace with honor. for the U.S. and its ally in South Vietnam. North Korea looked past negotiations and planned an attack. The U.S. showed superiority by using aircraft and sending them over North Korea. North Vietnam began to negotiate after the air invasion was taking place. The United States and Vietnam representatives gathered in France to reach a peace agreement for all parties throughout the United Nations. When the peace treaty was signed, U.S. forces and foreign troops had to withdraw from South Vietnam no later than 60 days after signing the agreement. American and foreign prisoners of war were released after the agreement was signed.
Even though Nixon looked like a promising leader for the United States, he couldn't help but feel he was being betrayed by others in office. This would result in his downfall and in one of the biggest scandals in political history. Early in the morning of June 17, 1972, several burglars were arrested inside the office of the Democratic National Committee, located in the Watergate building in Washington, D.C. This was no ordinary robbery. The burglars were connected to the President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, and they had been caught while attempting to wiretap phones and steal secret documents. To this day, historians are not sure whether Nixon knew about the Watergate burglary operation before it happened, but he took steps to cover it up afterwards, raising hush money for the burglars, trying to stop the FBI from investigating the crime, destroying evidence, and firing uncooperative staff members. In August 1974, after his role at the Watergate conspiracy had finally came to light, knowing that he was facing impeachment, Nixon decided to resign. His successor, Gerald Ford, immediately pardoned Nixon for all his crimes that he committed or may have not committed while in office. Although Nixon was never prosecuted, the Watergate scandal changed American politics forever, leading many Americans to question their leadership and think more critically about the presidency.
That because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.